crowdfunding campaign on Indiegogo, which raised over $300,000. And I am the coordinator of the Ottawa Game Conference, so I'm kind of merging the two to be the moderator of this gaming panel about crowdfunding. So let's start maybe with one of the questions I think everyone has asked. Everyone who, actually, first of all, who's ran a campaign and who wants to run a campaign in the near future? Everyone, okay. So I'm not going to waste time explaining what these are. They're crowdsourcing funds, basically, to have games and to basically run any project. So Indiegogo versus Kickstarter, I think that's my first question to the panelists. It's two different platforms. They both have advantages and disadvantages. So maybe we can just do a little run through of why. Actually, let's start. I think Kelly's the only one that did Indiegogo on this panel. So do you want to go ahead and tell us why Indiegogo?
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously before kind of, Indiegogo and Kickstarter are the two big ones. So I think, for every project before you start, you're going to kind of have, you make a list, the pros and cons of both. Obviously, Kickstarter has huge, traffic. Gaming is also their biggest vertical. So, the amount of funds that they raise every year crowdfunding with your gaming is really crazy. And just being on Kickstarter gets you a lot of traffic. At the same time, the con of that, I would say, is sometimes, with more competition, sometimes there's the fear of kind of being buried. But for us, looking into the two, we actually went with Indiegogo. And as we started doing our learning, a common kind of thread that we heard from everyone was that they had maybe a more personal experience with Indiegogo, and they kind of, I don't want to say hold your hand a little bit more, but maybe offer some help. And so, for example, we were able to attend a couple of Indiegogo learning sessions in Ottawa. We streamed one from Toronto. And if you're actually able to go to one of these events, which Indiegogo has fairly often, you can potentially meet the gaming lead for Indiegogo, and that's kind of a big deal. They're able to give you a lot of advice and help you along. We weren't able to meet him, but we were able to meet the Canadian rep and put us in contact with him. So kind of being able to have that more personal touch that we got through Indiegogo was, that kind of shifted the balance. And then just two other things, maybe I'll just say, these are just kind of differences, I won't say pros and cons, but people may or may not know, is Kickstarter obviously screens, so not every project goes through, which is different because Indiegogo, all projects go through. So if you submit to Kickstarter, there's a chance that, your project might not, kind of make the vetting process. And then the other big thing, which is kind of weird, is, there's also the go or no go. So if you fund through Kickstarter, it's all or nothing. If you don't hit your goal, that's it. With Indiegogo, you have the option of, if you make part of your goal, you have the option of keeping that. And then the last one, which is kind of weird, is I think on Indiegogo campaigns, you're allowed to donate multiple times, whereas on Kickstarter, you're not. So some of the differences are big, some of them are small, they're not necessarily good or bad on their own, but it's just, kind of things to be aware of if you're, doing research and deciding between the two. It's a long answer.
Covered everything.
Yeah.
And maybe we can follow up with, so Sylvain, you kind of experienced that with the go or no go. So you did raise $34,000, but you didn't get to keep any of it. Knowing that, would you have done Indiegogo instead?
Nope, not at all.
No.
We did a Kickstarter purposefully because of that.
Okay.
We had other projects on Trade Wars has been a baby. We want to continue developing it, but we didn't want to spend our own money on it. Basically, we were focusing on some other stuff. So we figured, well, let's try Kickstarter, and if the community and people at large want to make it happen, then the money's going to be raised, and we'll do it. But there was a certain basic amount of money that we needed to do the the basic update of it that we had in mind. So even if we had 10%, 20% less than what we were targeting, we didn't want to go with it anyway. So it was a go no go, and that was the way we were thinking. So Kickstarter was the better approach, because if it failed, we were working on other projects, for other companies and our own stuff. And that wasn't really big of an issue if it failed. Obviously, we wanted it to be successful, to kind of bring it up and kind of work on it. But so when we looked at Indiegogo, about 2 minutes later, that was it. Because I don't want to keep $2,000 or whatever it is. I want this to be funded and then go forward. So that was why we did that.
fixed funding as well. You don't need to do flexible funding. So if people, like for example, if you're building a product or a physical good that you need this amount of money to run it, the IB2 phone, I think was a good example of that they raised over $2 million, but they were asking for like $8 million or something crazy. They didn't keep any of that money because without that $8 million, they couldn't have done it. So that's why fixed funding for a lot of stuff also works.
Yeah, and in our case, the other reason why we went for Kickstarter is because it is a bigger operation. So even though Indiegogo had a fixed cost, we preferred to reach out to bigger operation anyways.
What about you, Daniel? Any reason why Kickstarter over?
Yeah, okay, so our story will be a lot harder for you than yours will be, because when we started, Kickstarter wasn't available in Canada. We spent almost $5,000 with a chartered public accountant in the US trying to figure out how to get the money to Canada without having 40 to 50% clawed back in withholding tax. So we actually were going to go with Indiegogo by default. And it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, I tweeted, "I can't believe how hard it is to run a Kickstarter from Canada." I woke up the next day and Kickstarter said, "We're launching in Canada." And I said, we should have asked for a pony or something. But, so we were on Indiegogo originally. We actually had the game vertical lead really contacting us aggressively, John Vasquez, he was very helpful and wanted to give us all this extra support. The reality is, if you look at the numbers, and there's a bunch of articles online, statistically you are dead in the water if you're a video game and you try to use Indiegogo. And you won't know it either, because you might want to raise, say, $50,000. In Indiegogo, you might get your $50,000 about 24 or 48 hours before the campaign is over, and you'll call it a success. But you'll never know that Kickstarter would have given you 75 to 100 to 125. So, and the reason is that because of fixed funding, the statistical curve looks like a big shot in the beginning, and then a slow trickle at the trough of despair for most of the campaign, and then at the very end you get liftoff. Most people might not realize that the reason you get liftoff at the end is because a lot of people check on the box that says, "Remind me 48 hours before this thing is over," because they're like, it's basically too long, didn't read, that looks cool, I'll see if anybody else funds it, and then I'll come back later. And then there's stuff like that, sort of peer pressure involved. So fixed funding actually increases the chances. Flexible funding, you got to wonder if someone raises, half of the money they want, where's that money going? It's not going towards a game getting finished anytime soon. So fixed funding is really important. But I think the number one reason for Indiegogo or for Kickstarter is that 25.6% of our money came from people who had no idea where we were and found us through the discovery mechanism of Kickstarter. So when you look at the numbers, a full 25% just came from people who were browsing because they know that Kickstarter is a great place to find games and unearth gems of that quality. So at the end of the day, the network effects matter, and they have mind share. Indiegogo doesn't, and I would never choose Indiegogo over Kickstarter. And that's not because I don't think that they're doing great things in other places. I think it's because I'm making games, and games for Kickstarter, that's where you go. It could be completely different for film or any of the other things. And I know that Skullgirls had a big breakout success, raised $800,000, but they had and we'll probably talk about this later, but they had a major brand that was already fully established. Their fans were going to go and find them wherever they were. They could have thrown up their own website and probably raised the same amount of money. I don't think Indiegogo had a huge part in that. And I could be wrong, that's just my opinion, but for us, we're trying to protect their chances of success.
What about you guys? Are you so far thinking that you made the right choice, or?
Yeah, well, I mean, the previous panelists definitely laid out all the evidence that is needed. Otherwise, I mean, it was mostly the network and the fact that Kickstarter has a bigger crowd for gaming. Really, those are the ultimate 2 factors.
Well, let's move on to the next question. So in the panel, we've already kind of saw that there were different reasons for doing different games. I know Windward was almost launching, so clearly you guys didn't really necessarily need the money for making the game itself. You're already almost there. Whereas, you were saying you needed it to actually build the game or to get the funds to get the license and all that stuff. So what aspect of the crowdfunding do you think is the most beneficial? Is it the funding itself, or is it the visibility, the marketing, the PR?
Yeah, so the funding is evidently, money in your pocket. What's not to like about that? But also, it is a marketing tool in itself. We're also aiming to get into the top 100 in Steam Greenlight, and that's kind of like a cross promotion to do with them. builds its own community around the Kickstarter page, and that community will move to our personal page once the Kickstarter, whatever happens with the Kickstarter. And those people, because those people want the game, there are people who wanted it prior to the Kickstarter launching, so that's just going to increase the people who want the game, and bringing it over, it just multiplies your crowd, basically.
Right. And any other thoughts? Like, I know that the Urban Quest, you guys are just getting the funding. Like right now, you just reached the $20,000 goal.
Yeah.
So what's, like, you guys needed the money to do it, or was it more to get visibility? And
I would agree, similar, like the money is always nice to have. In reality, probably it wouldn't have been, a break for, go, no go for the project if we wanted to go ahead with it anyways. It's nice to establish kind of an audience in the community, obviously, beforehand. And for us, a lot of it was, like I said, our game is a little bit different. It's kind of puzzle based, so we're kind of, we're taking a little bit from a couple of different kinds of gaming audiences. And so for us, we're active on social media and doing kind of outreach that way. And it was a good opportunity for us to kind of meet that community, so to speak, learn a little bit more about them. Because we have an idea of who we think the audience is going to be, and then in reality, it could have been different. So definitely very much like the marketing, the outreach, the promotion aspect was very much part of why we wanted to run.
right. So the feedback is clearly really important. So you guys haven't finished it yet. You're
Just start.
Yeah, exactly. You finished, so you probably had that. You're right in the middle of it. So I know from personal experience, we were in, overhead with comments and feedback from everyone. And I think that's one of the very important things is, you're saying about that community building thing. Those are your first backers, the first people who are going to support your game, and you really want to be involved with them. And I don't know if it's the same for you guys, but it looks like everyone has an opinion as well. So even though they're backing you and they want to be involved, they also want to have a say in the game because they think that by funding it, it means that they can change something or they have a say in what's going to happen. So maybe someone can comment about that. Like, how much of the community feedback did you actually use in your game, or did you actually use in changing things or tweaking things, sorry.
I can start. So our audience is very niche, so they've loved this game for a long time. If they've heard of it at all, you either love it or you've never heard of it. I'm sure there's some people that played it and hated it, but I don't know there are too many people who did. But for our particular case, it's really easy to come up with ideas for our game because, like, wouldn't it be great if there's really a lot of kind of obvious paths that you can tread. And so it was hard for us because people were guessing what our next thing was going to be, what our next reveal was going to be before we even did it, because it's kind of a natural, logical flow. And right now we opened up a private forum for backers, and we have like 5,000 people in there, and they're very much interested in telling us who needs to be in the game. And if we did it, it would be crazy. Like every beat 'em up on Earth, like every character would be represented. The Ninja Turtles would be in. Before they flew to a different planet. And it's like, like I've already mentioned it before that, we may be the first game with 50 DLCs, like free ones, obviously. But you have to say no at some point. It's the whole, asking for a faster horse problem with Henry Ford. You have to say no, and it's just how you say no. Right now, I've gotten into the habit of saying that's a really great idea. Because it is a great idea, but we have a very aggressive schedule for production. We have like 10 months left. Our license expires, so everything's very much a ticking clock for us. So we have to really concentrate on the core game and everything that happens around it. Whether we have volleyball courts in the game afterwards, or there's a million things. But yeah, I think you can get kind of caught up in that fan. Oh, that would be awesome. Hey, we should totally do that. And then eventually we get their design sessions are completely overblown, and we forget we've got like a deadline. So we have to find a really nice way to say no, and that's a really great idea is working for me right now.
Yeah. What about any, yes?
I think community feedback is huge. When we started Trade Wars in 2007, the first release was that Trade Wars Rising, not the original one. We established a habit of asking the community, which knew the original version fine, like most of them, still, it's like this today. Like, what do you think? What do you want to see in here? What work then that you still want to keep in this viewer for like a remake and all that stuff? And so we set up a forum, and we have constant discussions with the trade wars that we should have those. Some of the players have been with us for 7 years, and they're still there every day because it's community. So when we did the Kickstarters as well, we had threads in the forum that we were linking to that, so that people from the Kickstarter would also be able to engage with our hardcore veteran community as to what the Trade Wars game is, what it should be, what it was before, all that stuff. And we got huge amounts of forum posts from a lot of people during the engagement time of the campaign about features and about all sorts of stuff. And similar to your comment, and we're used to this. Like, every player has their opinion about what changes should be done, and you got to be polite. And just because the community says it's a good idea, if you implement everything that they say, even some of them, sometimes it's going to end up like crap because they think it's a good idea, but maybe conceptually it may not work very well with the whole, right? So you gotta take the comments and kind of boil it over in the community, and people can kind of iron things out for you if you give them a chance and a way to do it. So during an engaging Kickstarter or Indiegogo, I encourage people to really pay attention to the feedback, but not be reactive to it at the same time. So you got to kind of take it in and look at it in perspective, and then build something that in general is going to work really well for the direction the community is trying to guide you towards.
Any other comments?
Well, actually, Evan here, who's our game designer, he was at PAX, was it Easter?
PAX East Prime.
Yeah, Prime. I think we had an idea suggested to us that actually ended up making it into the game. So, as was said, you get great ideas left and right. I mean, even the people who work at the studio sit there and go, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this? And yeah, it would, but development time and money and all these things. So you have to pick and choose.
He's like, he's so frustrated.
So yeah.
Or you'll actually have an idea that you came up with and you'll put it out there and you'll get like 5 people emailing going, I'm really glad you guys went with my idea. And then they give you more.
And those people become your biggest advocates. Like, they're your first backers, and they're so excited. And like, I know when we did our campaign, they were answering questions that other people had, and you want to love and nurture those people because they're really the ones that are building that community, and they're doing it for you. And I think that's another interesting point, that the marketing and PR that comes out of running a Kickstarter is huge. And so you guys are almost at the end of development. I understand that. It's one of the reasons why you're running the campaigns to get that marketing and PR. So how do you prep for that? How do you prep for
Making the campaign itself?
Yeah.
A lot of research into looking. There isn't exactly one right answer. There are a lot of wrong answers. So it's just cross-referencing a lot of things. It was before anything, it was Indiegogo or Kickstarter, and then within Kickstarter, it was like, okay, well, these pages do these things that are great. These pages do these things that are not so great. Let's learn from the good and the bad of every page that we can, and just trying to amalgamate it all into something that's sensible and try and put it out. Basically, it's experimentation.
Right. So did any of you guys get frustrated because we're seeing so many more projects that are being funded, and before it was kind of a newer thing, and blogs really picked it up, and it was a big story, and it wasn't that hard to get featured, but now there's so many, and you're hidden in this crowd of awesome projects, whether they're gaming or any other kind of projects. So how do you stand out from that crowd, and you want?
Because of the favors, of course. Actually, yeah, there was a lot of frustration for us, but we did the first one, and we kind of went and just threw it up there, see what happens, and didn't go very far. It's like we noticed, okay, we need to prep for this a little bit better and kind of line it up with the community and all that stuff. So we improved a little bit on the video didn't want to spend money so much on that, because we still wanted to keep it clean. We didn't need the money to run the business, right? So we had other things, so, but still, we wanted to make a better go at it, better art, better proposal, all that stuff. So we did our research and we prepared for it, and so we explored Kickstarter projects that won and those that failed. And we figured out our presentation is way better than these other projects that have succeeded. And there's some projects that I saw. I remember one was this guy, this artist. I shouldn't even say he is an artist. He would take recommendations from, take pictures from people's pets and draw them with pencil. And that he was raising pledges for that. Like if you had like $15 for like a simple picture of your pet, as a caricature. And the art itself was, well, frankly, I couldn't do it. And I'm horrible at art. I'm not an artist at all. And I was looking at it like, okay, this guy's going to fail miserably. He raised 30 grand. And he reached all his targets, and he was just basically just drawing some stuff that like a 6-year-old would probably draw on a piece of paper. And that got me really frustrated. Like, how come these projects that are really bad, like the quality is really not there, how are they succeeding with little to nothing? And my thing, like, it's an old brand, it's, how come it's not going very well? So there was a lot of frustration. However, my campaign had its serious drawbacks that are specific to the brand and the way it was set up. And that's likely why it failed on the second try. It's like our community is way older. They didn't understand what Kickstarter was. Even though we have a fair amount of players for a long time, they thought that we were making a new game on Kickstarter that was called Kickstarter. Very few understood, like, what are you trying to do? The game's here, and you're making another Trade Wars, called Kickstarter Trade Wars. You're between like 35 and 60 years old. Some of them are 70. Because it's an old brand, and so that was the first hurdle. And the second hurdle is that we couldn't tell, because of licensing restrictions on the brand, because we don't know the name Trade Wars. We couldn't say outright, we couldn't make a Kickstarter out of improving or updating Trade Wars. It had to be the engine behind it. And that's really hard to sell. Even though that Kickstarter itself, the page looked great, and all that stuff, like trying to get people to understand what we're really trying to do is really hard using text and words. So you guys, don't be frustrated with successes and failures on Kickstarter. Because for some reason, some just work really well. You don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Some of them are famous, or whoever, I don't know, right? Focus on yours and the reason why yours should succeed. And make sure that all the little ducks are in a row to make yours succeed. And we can always talk about success and failure and reasons why these guys have that success is a little bit bigger than not. But yeah, it can be frustrating.
Any other comments?
For me, for our game, so we launched at the same time as Mighty No. 9. The big Mega Man reboot, sorry, the not Mega Man reboot. And we also had to deal with Shanty Half Genie Hero, which is another big property from Way Forward. So you might think that we launched at the worst possible time ever, and you might have some, it might be real, it might be true. But the reason, and this was my decision at the end of the day, the reason that I went right away was because September 9th was the first day that you could launch a Kickstarter, in the official Canada Kickstarter. I knew the Kickstarter had a lot of press lined up for that. I knew that if we got featured on the Kickstarter front page in the featured section, I knew that statistically it would raise our chances of success to 89%. So I said, fine, let's do it, because we're the first big game out of the gate, the most recognizable game in that brand. We were up, like, in terms of popularity, it was us and a hockey stick. That was pretty much the two things that came out the first day. And the second day into the campaign, we got featured. So, and then in fact, the first day was really bad. The first day, if you look at traditional trajectories, your biggest are the beginning and the end. We had like this horrible average day the first day, and then the second day was triple that because of the fact that we got featured on Kickstarter. So Yeah, part of me thinks that all the retro dollars went into the mighty number 9 void. We even had people in our comments that would say, hey, sorry guys, I pulled my pledge because I wanted to give these guys more stuff. And then they came back and said, hey, that's not very fair. I'll pledge to you so that everyone can have a game. But anyway, so it comes down to timing. I think, we'll probably talk later, I think our biggest mistake was our rewards, but I think the timing worked out just in our favor though. I'm not entirely sure. I don't know what would happen. The good news is that you shouldn't be thinking about how much bigger than 100% you could have got maybe. I think the idea is that 100%, like Kickstarter recommends, should be exactly how much you actually need to make the game. Because then you can't be disappointed with failure. I mean, if you lowball yourself to the point where it's not actually what you really needed, then you're in trouble. But luckily for us, you know, it was a lot higher than a lot of other games in our niche. Like Mercenary Kings launched with $75,000 needed, and we went out with 180. And we thought that's pretty, like some people just kind of laughed at us and thought it was preposterous that we'd even get it. We're not a well-known studio, you know, we're not snowed in, we're not Glitchsoft, you know, we're not Magnet. We're just a small virtual team that's just getting started. So yeah, I mean, thank God. I mean, part of it is luck too. I mean, part of it, I mean, I'm not saying that we got lucky, but I'm saying that part of it is that you prepare as much as you can. It took us 6 months to make this campaign. And it went a lot of research that went into it, like probably 150 different Kickstarters. We actually went from top to bottom and did what worked, what didn't work. So it takes a lot. It takes a lot, but then at the end of the day, you got to just let it go, roll the dice, and see what happens. And if it doesn't work, you just come back and do it again. You know, it's not a reflection on you. It's a reflection of what happened at that time in that environment. That's what it is.
So what would you say would be the most important component on your project? Is it video? Is it the pledge levels? Is it the actual content that's in it? Like, what do you put the most time focusing on, and what's going to draw in that 25% of new people who've never heard of you?
I would say that it has to be between the video and the content itself, because it's one thing to say, hey, do you want to buy my game? If the person says, okay, what's the game, and you have nothing to show, then how are you going to sell it? But if you say, hey, buy my game, this is what it is, and you have a video, or just you have content on the page itself, that's how you sell a game, or anything really, is to show them what the product is. So because just because of the fact that you're asking them to give you their money, and you have to, you know, it's kind of like a trust thing where, trust me, this is the game, you know, versus this is my idea, which a lot of Kickstarters, they start with ideas, and they don't actually have anything to show. It's actually against the guidelines of Kickstarter to put out any like simulations or like a render of this is what it would look like you're actually not, yeah, you're not allowed to do that. So I don't think it said that in the guidelines. It didn't specify. But the video is definitely super important because that's the first thing that they see on the page. And how likely are you to click a video rather than to read the whole entire thing?
The use of graphics, I know it helps a lot. I don't know if you guys have all done it, but we've seen many of the, even when press picks it up, you know, when blogs pick it up, you see their logos, and then it shows on the page like, oh, this was backed by TechCrunch, this is really cool, and then it just draws in that extra amount of people because you see it visually, you don't have to look for the information, it kind of just jumps out in your face. So does everyone kind of agree on that point, that it's video and content, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
think so.
agree that those are obviously the two main things. I think, ironically, so we sent it out to people beforehand, like we had been working on it as a team for months, and I think what happens then is you get like that myopia, like you're too close to the product, like you need to the project and you need to send it out. So we did, and I think for people that are familiar with crowdfunding, like the video is probably the first thing, you know, you're used to just going through lots of campaigns, the video is the first thing you see, so it is, you know, obviously the quality of the video is important. I would say probably like under 3 to 4 minutes, because people don't have all day. And ironically, the people who we sent it out to who weren't as familiar with crowdfunding read it first, like read the content first, so we knew, okay, we have to kind of strike a balance. But I think that's where you have to be super, super clear about your messaging, and you know, you have to think through who your audience is going to be. Again, like having, you know, being so close to the project, you think, you know, it's self-evident, you know, of course it's kind of explained, but you really do need to touch on the basics, like, you know, what are you doing, like, what is the game, why you're doing it, you know, maybe more specifically why you're getting the funding. And yeah, just being really clear about what it is, because again, for someone who's not familiar with the project or who's not familiar with crowdfunding, you know, that kind of all has to be answered within the first minute or two of that on the same page. And we actually so we shot our video, and we actually reshot it. We just completely scrapped it because we weren't happy enough with the first version. But maybe just more anecdotally about the video, we went with like an amateur documentary maker because we wanted to, like, we didn't want it to be perfect. We didn't want it to seem super polished. Like, that's not who we are. We kind of wanted to, you know, show the brand a little bit. So it's just us at our office. You know, there's kind of mistakes at the end. Like, we like that feel. And so I'd say maybe for the video, and I know also, Daniel, you guys had like a funny video kind of. You guys were just showing your, I thought it was really funny, like showing, you know, your character kind of. But I think that's important also, is to show who your brand is. And if you're, you know, if you're fun, then you can communicate that to people that, you know, that kind of resonates as well.
Yeah, we made a video that was polarizing because you could really hate that video if you wanted to. We got called a lot of things, terrible things like hipsters. You know, yeah, because I don't know. We didn't want to take the game as seriously because the game didn't take itself seriously. So we're trying to like take that page from the actual canon, from the actual the way the game came across for North America. We could have done it better. You were seeing a lot of time pressure to make something, and the team that weren't all in the same location. Like Bannon shot his stuff in Los Angeles. Bannon is a very creative, energetic person, and created his vision for that, and we kind of had to tack them on together. And actually he does acting out in LA as well. You know, the story of the person going to LA to make it in movies. But so we had to, you know, he's got a lot more creative, more energetic style than I do. I would have just gone on and said, hey, we're making this game. And as you can see, I'm very just sort of, these are the facts. I'm the facts guy that they wheel out at the end. But you know, so we had some issues with it, and in the end it came up pretty good. But I think, if I can use this time to say it, I think the Kickstarter is broken in one fundamental way. There's two kinds of projects. There's the project that Kickstarter started with, this project that could not be created any other way, and so you came to Kickstarter. You couldn't get publisher deal, you couldn't get this, you couldn't get a budget together. You really want to make this happen, it's a labor of love. You go to Kickstarter to see if there's fans that believe in what you're doing, and you get the money. That's me, and I think we're like the last of those kind of projects. On the other hand, this project is the future of Kickstarter, because you guys are coming in with a game that's pretty much done, or very close to being done, close enough that you can actually go through the Steam greenlight process. We couldn't go on Steam because we're not substantially complete. I mean, you know, it took all of us just to get enough, you know, game footage together for the video. So the thing is that the problem, the catch-22, is that you have to run your Kickstarter when you're done. So there's no longer this, hey, wouldn't it be amazing if this game existed? Sure, but you got to make it on your own first. Or, you know, like think Hyperlight Drifter, that was around the same time as us. They raised a gargantuan amount of money, asking for almost nothing. And they had no talking in their video at all. There was no video. It was just a gameplay trailer from beginning to end. I'm not exactly sure if it was real gameplay because it's really smooth, but the fact is that it was real. Yeah, it was. But you should see the new combat. It's crazy. It's a beautiful game, and it probably would have sold itself anyway. But the point is that your product's already done, and you don't have to actually say anything about it at all, because Kickstarter is a pre-sale store now. You're running a retail store. You're selling copies of your game for 30 days. It is no longer about, you know, getting, I guess, wouldn't it be cool, and then turning that into like a grassroots movement. I'm not saying that it's not possible, but in order for us to succeed that way, we had to have an IP that was already well established. You know, from a branding marketing point of view, this is like our second game already. And we didn't make the first. We had nothing to do with it. We just played it as kids. But the reality is that we're coming in with an established IP. If you don't have an established IP, or you're working on a new IP, I don't think the way we did it would work for you. I think that this way is the way it's going to work for you. Even if you can put together a really compelling alpha that shows the game, and you have enough minutes to actually show what you intend to do. It can be placeholder art, but if you can show that there's something special there, And I think that's way more successful than talking a lot. And Bad Dudes. Bad Dudes 2 was a beat 'em up revival project that happened like last year, and they failed because they did exactly what you said. They talked a lot, and they had, they actually had to be pressured by the community to even provide more graphics for the game. And you can't do that. It's not about your idea. I mean, I think we were in the danger zone because I think we had like 16 seconds of possible trailers because we're just not off the ground that much. We have the engine that's working, but there's so many things that are missing in our current like pre-alpha that you know, we just scraped under the roof of success, and I think that's because we had the established IP. But if you don't, show as much as you can. I don't want to take up too much more time, but that's
Right.
I had to say that one thing, and I'll probably hit the shot for this.
But it's good, and it's really good advice too, and that kind of ties in really well to the next point, which is pledge levels. You know, you did say it is pretty much now a pre-order store. Like, what do you give people who back you? What do you give them to get their money, basically? You know, we see a lot of $5 thank you, but usually people don't really back those things. They'll be your grandma and your great aunts or whatever that just like, here's $5, I helped you out. But what are the pledge levels? It's like, of course you can sell the game. That's one, but what about the rest? Like, how do you go about having so many, especially for a game? Anyone want to comment on that?
Yeah, I guess I'm going to put my 2 cents in there. We had a really strange story, especially the second time around. We raised $34 grand, and that was like the average pledge was over $1,000. Some people in the community, in our community, that are hardcore players that we're talking about, they are professionals, they own companies, and they really believed it, and they put in a lot of money. And we had those higher pledge levels to accommodate that as well. Even one of them, after it failed, he still insisted, like, I'm sending you a check because I want these goodies anyway. So yeah, cool, no problem. You know, the 3D printed spaceship and we signed and everything. No, that's cool. The community's there, but that's unusual, by the way, because most of our pledges should have been more or less the Kickstarter standard, which is usually between $10 and $50 per pledge, which that should be your party for, unless the item, you know, like your item, Carla, for example, is obviously the first pledge. The major pledge was probably one of the products. Which
Yeah,
was
exactly.
maybe
That was
$100.
the average one was about $300.
Yeah, but that's obviously specific to the device, right? That's the device, that's the price point. But for most games, it's between $10 and $50. Be $10.55 having most of the pledges. So that's what you should expect. But we had, you know, most of our community didn't understand what we were trying to do, and the rest of them didn't get what the engine was about and all that stuff behind it. So those that did pledge were really the hardcore guys that wanted to see it go, that had money in their pocket and were like hardcore like for 6 years in the game. So that's when we kind of realized, like, okay, this is not going to fly unless the license changes and a bunch of stuff changes. Now we're actually doing our own crowdsourcing inside our own webpage. Well, we're setting it up now as far as donations, because we saw that our community, if they go to our site, if they play there and they see there's a donation to evolve the product, that they'll understand. And they have money apparently to spend on it.
So maybe we can just ask,
Yeah, sure.
like, everyone on this panel, what's your highest pledge level, or what was your highest pledge level, and what was it?
Our highest pledge level was $1,500.
Yeah.
And I made sure that, like, when there are so many nuances to picking your rewards as far as what it is, how much it is, whether it's a physical product or not. There's so many things that go into it. And one of the ways to really get your backers involved and get, like, the community really involved and to love your project is to give them some form of influence into it. And then, you know, it comes back to, like, this is a great idea. Okay, can't do it, but if you pay $1,500, then we'll let you kind of like, hey, maybe you could do this, you know. And it's to our discretion. The reward for that pledge level was you get to work with our developers and our designers to help build a town in the game, which is much like building a store in your city.
Yeah, and we had overworlders too, to let you build like a level.
Yeah.
Like a gang thing.
Yeah.
And
So-
how much was that one?
Overworlders is $500, and sole proprietor, which is when you create one of those River City stores, is $1,000.
Yeah. And how many of those did you get?
We sold 8 of those.
Okay.
Our highest reward was like a boss. It was $5,000 to be in the game as a boss. We sold 3. We sold all of them. Yeah.
So you can really get creative.
Yeah. One of the people who bought it was Dan Paladin, who created Castle Crashers. So we're having a lot of fun with that. But just for some psychology, I just backed his project. Awesome.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Other hands?
This is what I did. I grabbed my
Wait
phone,
for
I
my
looked at the
t-shirt.
project, I whipped down the rewards to find the first one where I could put my name or something in it, and I pledged it. You too?
I went for the first one with a t-shirt. I was like,
Yeah.
that t-shirt is sweet and I freaking want it.
Yeah. So just, I mean, like you said, you want to have something that lets them feel like they're part of the game, and that really did it. I think, you know, I think 25 to 30% of ours was part of those higher reward levels.
So we also had, our top level reward was $5,000, but we like basically made it as a joke, like we called it like when they were first born after you, kind of knowing that like it probably wasn't gonna sell, but the reward for that was, it was kind of weird because we also have like an actual physical product, which is like a game that people play in the real world. So for our rewards, like off the top, we decided what was feasible, and so we decided right away that we weren't gonna be shipping any physical goods, like we just didn't want to have to deal with fulfillment and all of that, so we were like, okay, everything has to be digital. And we're like, well, what can we do? We already have kind of an existing product, so we kind of mashed the two together, which maybe helped us in some ways, because people who were just looking for a discount on our existing product could just go buy it there. But maybe in other ways it's confusing. But that's what the top tier was, which was $5,000. We said we'd come make an urban quest in your city, and we'd throw like an event for you and 200 of your friends. And again, like we kind of had our hopes up that maybe someone would, but that one didn't get picked up. But our next one, which was 2750, it was similar. It was like urban quest your city, and you were able to do a couple of just from stuff that we were doing inside, more related to the physical product, so it's different. But I would say maybe like my advice would be think about what is feasible. So like again, right away, kind of make a decision about if you want to actually ship physical goods or not, and then think about like the retail value of things, also like the relative value of things. We like went through a bunch of iterations of our perks because we realized like we priced something too high, like it didn't make sense, relative to something else. So it has to kind of make sense. Give people options for like high and low. Like no one really wants like the $1 like the $1 is like a thank you, but that's kind of lame.
And you have to pull out your credit card too.
Yeah, it's like even if it's a low donation, try to make it worth their time. So we set our lowest at like $5. We said we'll at least give you like a badge on our site and a coupon for urban class. So all the way, and then think about who the audience is. So that was like the $2,700 one was more obviously like their business user. Like think about who your audience is, who your target is for each of those perks. But like I would lay it out and like the perk and the dollar value, like lay it out, look at it again and again and again, because we just kept going through iterations. And you're like, no, that one's a little higher. This one's kind of lame. Swap it out, and maybe think about perks that you want to release later on. Indiegogo, which you probably know where we'll go with. Your review? No, but Indiegogo has all kinds of stats. They say like $20 is the most popular one, just because it's an easy dollar amount. $100 is the one you'll make the bulk of your money on. But then like the average donation is $70. And this is across like all of their campaigns, so it's not just gaming. So those are like really like big numbers. But just, kind of think about, I just realized I lost my train of thought. Where was I going? Just, think about, and then also think about perks that, like, you don't want too few or too many, so they say, between 7 and 12, so it's not like you're not overwhelming people. So you maybe start off with a couple, do the early bird thing, where maybe you just have 50 of one to see if it takes off, and then think about maybe perks, like, that you want to release later on, because if you do have kind of a slump in the middle, introducing a new perk could be, a good way to kind of, perk up your that's fun. Sorry, like, give your campaign a bit of a boost.
So on that, adding a new perk like throughout the campaign, I don't know if you can do an option. You can do an option.
You can add new perks, but also you can make it so that people can just add to their amount.
Okay.
So if you originally pledged 20 and you want to get the next tier up, you can add to your account. some campaigns allow you to add $10 for a certain item, and that's outside of the reward tier, but you can still ask for it.
Yeah.
So it's very flexible. I just wanted to mention like two things to really consider is what can you leverage. So digital assets are really great because you don't have to pay to send them out. Just do the internet magic. Yeah, it's sent free. And then as far as that goes, like yeah, T-shirt is awesome. That's one thing that a lot of people have at a certain price point, and that's even to the projects I pledged. Like I pledged to Mighty Number 9, and I was like, I want a T-shirt for that thing. And I went to the T-shirt. I didn't really care if it was 50 or 70 or whatever. I went to the T-shirt. And then, you know, the danger of that is you have to ship it out. You have to get the right size. So we'll talk later. Try and stay away from too many physical items because it's a headache to deal with.
Shipping, customs, especially if we're going international.
You can, there's the option of whether it's just in Canada or international, or you can charge the shipping if it's outside of Canada. There's a lot of stuff to it.
On the other hand, if you don't offer the physical stuff in the mix, you miss out on a lot of profits. Some people are looking for the T-shirt or the mouse pad or whatever.
And you know, it gives you free marketing in the end. People are walking around with your shirt on their backs, and people are, they're nice. I'm not saying it's a giant tiger looking shirt that everyone cares
That's
about,
like
but
this
they're,
one.
you know, like those are shirts that people would wear, and I think that the main idea here is to, if you like it, if you'd like to get that for yourself, then probably other people would like it too. But if you wouldn't get it for yourself, then most likely other people won't get it either. So, and then to introduce new perks, kind of, I think this is going to be like one of the last points, but we'll talk about a little bit about stretch goals, what they can do, and are they useful, or are they actually just a pain in the ass because you have to come up with something new and it's another, you know, if you have the same time frame to ship your thing, you're just adding on some work. So maybe we can talk a little bit about stretch goals.
Sure. I'll start, but just so I can say one thing. That's really true. You have to make sure your rewards are play tested, just like you play test a feature before you go live. We had to change rewards live on the fly. You can't change the text of a reward once somebody backs it. It was a nightmare. We had like 24 rewards. We charged the wrong price for so many things that they didn't make. The expected value was different. You got to treat it like a poker game or a statistical probability. You have to make that right, or you won't get the lift off that you want. And the T-shirts are good about $100 and above. I don't think you can be successful without tangible rewards at this point. We tried, but then we ended up introducing all the ones like in stream because we were using it to keep that needle in the middle to buoy up the trough of despair. You know, we went from we're not going to do any of them because they're going to cannibalize the budget to we're doing like a retro remake on a Nintendo cartridge and all that stuff. So it's crazy. I'll just talk about for us for stretch goals. And this is just my opinion, but I don't believe in locking content behind stretch goals. A lot of game companies do it. They're like, if we get to this level, you'll get to play this with this new playable character. Well, here's some new like levels and stuff, and that's great, like from the psychological carrot perspective. But why would, so if you don't reach those stretch goals and you're not going to have that in the game, what's left in the game? You don't really know. It just seems like these ideas were things that were already part of the design that are kind of just being parceled out into like packages. Yeah, I'm just not into that. I'm kind of old school that way. I don't want to do free to play, I don't want to do freemium, I don't want to do any of that stuff. I want to make a game and then walk away from it, and I hope you like it or not. But that may just be me, and maybe that'll help you for your strategy, but I don't know. It just seems kind of artificial that you're locking content behind stretch goals. For me, locking consoles, locking platforms behind stretch goals is more in line with reality because those cost more time and money to license fees or whatever to make those things happen. So for our personal experience, all of our stretch goals were platforms. We made one of them, and the other ones were just so far out of reach. I think our second stretch goal was a full $100,000 over our baseline, which isn't good. You shouldn't do that. Well, yeah, but it just turned out that that was actually how much it would cost us to make the next console. Technologically, we had to rewrite our engine to do so. So that was time spent to do that. We didn't use Unity. We used our own. We have reasons for that because we want to open source it eventually and give it away for other people to use. So I guess our strategic objectives that way kind of conflicted with what would be the most economical or the smoothest grade up from the stretch goals from what, so I think we made a mistake that way. But, you know, we're still at about 235,000 all in, I think, after PayPal and backer kit add-ons. You were mentioning about add-ons. One quick thing about that is don't make your add-ons the same price. For us, like the soundtrack is 25 bucks, the t-shirt's 25 bucks, the physical game on a disc is 25 bucks. There's another one that's 25 bucks. So if you have 1,000 people that all pledged $15 and added $25 for their pledge, I know there's a survey that goes out, but something's gonna get lost in translation at that point. So it might, I saw that Mighty Number 9 actually did like $15 for one and 16 for another and 17 for another. I think that was just to make their lives easier in their spreadsheet. It didn't really actually have anything to do with the margins. You know, so that might be worth considering.
And Urban Quest, you guys just announced a stretch goal too,
We
right?
did. It's fun, because I think actually, like, there's like Indiegogo rules and there's Kickstarter rules. I think Indiegogo is like all about stretch goals. They tell you set stretch goals, set stretch goals. And I actually just read a Kickstarter blog today that said, stretch goals, maybe not such a good idea. But the reason we did it, and it's just because we had our goal over the weekend, and I had a call with our PR lady, because we're working with the PR firm on Monday, and it was to talk about what our strategy is going into the final week, like what's the angle of our pitches. And I realized it was like, well, you know, our campaign's funded now. It's like, so what? Like, the story kind of ended there, and we still had a week to go, and we want to kind of take advantage of that. So then, you know, we decided, we're like, okay, we're gonna, so our goal was 25, our new stretch goal was 25K, you know, kind of with the new perk for contributors. But for me, it all came down to the marketing and the PR angle, which was like, how do you keep the story going? Like, how do you keep it interesting? Because no one's just gonna write about a campaign that's funded just because it's funded. Like, you know, from the marketing angle, it was that pitch needed. But Kickstarter, the blog that I read today, the point about not maybe doing stretch goals was kind of like what you're saying. You don't want to compromise your primary goal by focusing on stretch goals. So if, for example, you know, if you reach, you know, another 20K, then we'll release it on this other console at the same time. You know, and if you get kind of bogged down in trying to reach your secondary goal, then, you know, you didn't really meet your promise to the people that, you know, who helped you reach your first goal. So I don't know if I would say to do it or not. I like, again, for us, it felt from a PR angle, it was good to just kind of keep the momentum going, keep the story fresh. You know, because when you send out a new pitch, every time it has to be a different angle. You can't send the same thing to the same writers. It has to be, you know, what's new this week. So from that angle, it keeps it interesting, but at the same time, I guess you don't want to kind of compromise or what your original